Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the sophomore album from Thomas Rhett, titled Tangled Up. You know, there's no easy way for me to do this review. And it's the problem with being one of the few critics who covers country on YouTube and one of the only ones who covers mainstream country. I got an obligation to show you the best stuff. To be honest, because I want to see you get more traction, get more fans, get more attention. But the bad stuff? Who wants this review? I gotta be honest, guys. Not me, because I've said in the past, negative reviews, they aren't fun for me to make, and they're sure as hell aren't fun for you guys. And most of you come from recommendations, at least I hope you do. I know there's a certain visceral catharsis watching somebody tear into a really bad album, but there's a real hollowness at the center for me. If there was ill intent or malicious design here, I can maybe feel righteous, but most of the time, it's just taking out the trash. I'm sorry. Now, some of you realize it's all predicated on the album actually being bad, which is not an assumption you ever want to enter into before going into art. The big problem is that almost every factor of this screamed of outright disaster. I covered Thomas Rhett's debut album back in 2013 when Bro Country was near its peak, and that album sucked. It did so in perhaps the worst possible way, by being so forgettably sterile and limp that the production and the melodies, and the only things that actually stood out were Thomas Rhett's obnoxious voice and even more obnoxious personality. Let me put it like this. When you owe your industry career to your dad being an average at best country songwriter and you make songs like the cheating track Take You Home, and a song called All American Middle Class White Boy, and no, I'm not kidding, that's a song title, and then frame them both as glorification rather than commentary, I can't respect that. And I honestly can't respect you either. So you know what? I'll give Thomas Rhett the slightest bit of credit when he said he was taking his album in a new direction, or towards a metropolitan pop country sound that's popular right now. The problem was, putting aside he needed the fact that he needed 20 additional songwriters to do that, his lead-off single was Crash and Burn, which I've already talked about on Billboard Breakdown for being a bad slice of pseudo-vintage pop that outright stole from Sam Cooke's Chain Gang, made Thomas Rhett look and sound like a braying asshole, and the song was actually co-written by Chris Stapleton, which just makes me feel really sad. The presence of Lunch Money Lewis and Jordan Sparks on the features list only made me feel a hell of a lot worse. More talented people completely wasting their time. That said, the ballad Die a Happy Man actually did seem kind of decent at first listen. And right now, the album has nowhere to go but up. So, anything that can save it? Was this a total waste of time on my part? Well, folks, I admit I went in with some pretty low expectations. I was not expecting this. This is Thomas Rhett's attempt at blending genre, bending country, pop, R&B, funk, and even hits of rock and hip-hop. It's a catastrophe. Put another way, I didn't think I would find a record that'd be comparable to the disaster that was Ray Schrimmer this year. Thomas Rhett, he comes close. Worse than Miley Cyrus's psychedelic disaster, worse than Chris Brown and Tyga collaborating with horrendous results. Hell, by comparison, Lana Del Rey and Mumford & Sons might as well be poet laureates. I might not have liked either of their albums, but at least they were more cohesive and they sounded better than this nightmare. And this is across the board too. Production, instrumentation, vocals, lyrics, themes. This album flat out does not work. It's barely saved by maybe one good song. Yeah, it's that bad. So where do I even start with this? Well, might as well start with Thomas Rhett himself. Believe it or not, I'll say he's putting a lot of himself into this album. There are points I can buy his sincerity. He believes what he's selling. The fact that most of what he's selling is entirely unlikable, that's the issue. And only emphasizes the more by his vocal tone. He's nasal and grating. And really lacking any sort of grit that you could tell in the background singer. Some of them are recognizable, like Chris Stapleton. They're trying to help however they can, but they can't do much. What's all the worse, he's trying to come across as having some swagger and sexual intensity in a retro R&B vein. It's painfully weak. It's the sound of a drunk frat boy stumbling on stage at karaoke, trying to get through an off-brand bro country or NSYNC track. And a sad fact, I wasn't kidding about the genre karaoke comparison, especially when it comes to the instrumentation and production. He is a guy who grew up around a karaoke machine for well over a decade, 15 years, regularly goes out to sing at the club, and even has DJ'd karaoke a couple of times. One of the biggest hangups I have about a lot of karaoke is that the backing tracks often are pretty slapdash and lacking the gravitas you normally see in the regular track. Most cause karaoke's done on the cheap and you almost never with the original instrumentation behind it. And thus, it's telling that with the exception of the audio fidelity, the production on this album is flimsy, astoundingly synthetic, and incredibly cheap, especially on obvious bro country songs like Anthem, Like It's Last Time, T-Shirt, Single Girl, and Learned It From the Radio. The electric guitars are almost universally gutless. The fake strings and horns are painfully obvious, the cymbals and drums are mixed way too high and compressed into this thin slurry, the synth tones have no vibrancy or color, and there's so much pitch correction slathered all over the mix that you have to wonder if the producers are desperately trying to salvage this in post. That's not even trying to be country. I've already talked plenty of times how Crash and Burn is vintage pop at its absolute worst that steals from Sam Cooke's Chain Gang and never gives credit. But then there's Die a Happy Man, a song I originally kinda liked a fair bit until you realize how much of a shameless ripoff it is of Thinking Out Loud by Ed Sheeran. Seriously, play those songs side by side, the opening chords are damn near identical. And that's before we get songs like Tangled, with the talk box intro and the attempt at a retro disco rollick, or the faux R&B of I Feel Good with that oily synth and admittedly decent bass line feels like something would have been dropped in the late 90s boy band years from an adult alternative back in the more obvious R&B emulation. The latter song only being saved by Lunch Money Lewis just cashing a check for 8 forgettable bars. It's really disappointing. And on the topic of guest stars completely being wasted, we have Jordan Sparks being totally underused on the early 2010s Carrie Underwood ripoff Playing with Fire. That actually could have worked maybe if it had a proper mix balance or guitar snarl, or actually placed Jordan Sparks at the same volume as Thomas Rhett instead of placing her as a glorified backup singer. And that's before we get Thomas Rhett trying to take cues from modern hip-hop and some of the most embarrassing nonsense I've ever heard in bro country, period. From the trap hi-hats on Anthem, to the Please Commend Shaking Your South Side that opens up the aggressively atrocious South Side, before Thomas Rhett mimics DJ Mustard's call sign on a beat that's half creaking acoustic guitar, half fake drums, part bass line, and part kazoo. And then we have Vacation that opens up with a pretty promising guitar rumble before Thomas Rhett drops into a rap cadence that jacks part of the Migos flow against a neutered organ, sleigh bells, and a guitar line that's sleazy enough to be gross but not enough to be fun. You know what, the one good thing I can say it's a bit more steel guitar than I'd otherwise expect. When the drums all sound this painfully weak, there's more fake scratching than a bad late 90s live Nickelodeon pilot, and none of the instrumental melodies are remotely memorable, and most of them aren't even audible. Why the hell should I care? Well, you know what? I'll give Thomas Rhett the slightest bit of credit and say that despite being a ripoff, Die Happy Man, it's at least passable from a songwriting point of view. Hell, The Day You Stop Looking Back, it's probably the best song on the album by playing to a stripped-back country sound about counseling a girl to move on from this guy who's ruining her life. Although, why Thomas Rhett frames himself as a player with the usage of I makes it look suspiciously like he's trying to just egg on this girl to forget the past and just get with him. And that's where we get to the attitudes that underscore the circuit where it really starts to piss me off. Because sure, you can make the argument there's only so much you can get mad at a dumb party record, because that's all it is, right? You can't care that much. I'd argue it runs deeper than that, and it manifests itself most in the framing. The smug, obnoxious, and completely ignoring any consequences in this framing. Thomas Rhett lets Another Love crash and burn on the titular song because why should the audience care if he doesn't? We get songs like Anthem and Learned It From the Radio that seems to celebrate the power of bro country songs. It feels like throwing a party for another party that wasn't even good to begin with. In the former case, trying to point out the tropes in modern bro country like Mariana's Trench did for Pop on Pop 101. Even though that band realized he needs to write a halfway decent song first. Yes, I will admit it. There's no song as aggressively hateful as All-American Middle Class White Boy here. That doesn't make this album's writing any less banal and formless. Half loaded with pro country hookup cliches and half with brand names like Bud Light Lime, which Thomas Rhett admits he doesn't even like on I Feel Good. Once you realize with Tangled Up is once you tear past the rotten instrumentation and the production, the aggressively obnoxious vocals, the lyrics are only ever memorable for being absolutely asinine. From the fangirl pandering of Single Girl to the leering after sex jam of T-Shirt to the country rap ass shaking of Southside. You want to know the cruelest irony of it all? On the final track, Learned It From the Radio, Thomas Rhett tries to salute the small town DJs who made country music special and possible, only never to realize that thanks to increased radio consolidation that made Thomas Rhett successful in the first place, so many of those small town stations, they're long gone. And so many of them would never have ever played Thomas Rhett. Because let's be clear here, this should not be played on country radio. It should not be played on any radio at all, because this isn't country music. It's one of the most shameless grab bag of genres that shows that the Zac Brown Band, they have the compositional skills to make this cross-section of genres work. Thomas Rhett and his army of songwriters show what happens when it doesn't work. This is pop country at its most flailing, incompetent, and only gaining success because country radio is so friggin' desperate right now. Hold on to sliding ratings that they're tracing towards the crossover audience without any regard for quality. But fine, you know what? Is it good by pop standards? Well, no, it's not. Terrible production, brainless without being charming, completely lacking in memorable instrumental melodies that aren't blatantly stolen without giving credit, and a frontman who only has a career thanks to low standards in bro country and nepotism. Ugh. Folks, 2 out of 10. And there's no way in the 9 hells I can possibly recommend this. Oh, you want me all to just piss you off? This almost had double the sales of Church's sophomore release during its debut week. Congratulations, America, for living down to my expectations. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Sorry if I seemed a little bit sour in this review. I'm really not feeling well. Trying to do 2 reviews tonight was a mistake. Anyway, if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'll be more happy to give it a listen. Yeah, I'll try to be more chipper next time. I'll try at least. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse. I'll see you next time.